I just want to say there is some tea outside. If anybody would like a cup before we start, it is all there. And it will keep on being there, so if you don't want now, you can have after also. That's fine.
بشینم سر راهی با امید نگاهی، بشینم سر راهی با امید نگاهی، خدایا تو گواهی. چه نغز است و چه خوب است و چه زیباست خدایا، چه گرمیم از این عشق، چه خورشید، چه پنهان و چه پیداست خدایا. دیدم صنمی سهر قدیر و چمایی، افکنده به رخسار چمن موی سیاهی. بشینم سر راهی با امید نگاهی، خدایا تو گواهی، خدایا تو گواهی. خدایا تو گواهی. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Hello. Okay. Can we have everyone in, please? Has anyone seen Anju? Because some of us may have to leave a little early, some buses and flights to catch, I think. So, let's start with a minute's silence, and then I'll hand over the evening to Jaya. So thank you. So lovely to see all of you back, and hope you're having a good time, and of course with the fest and everything. So Sudha was supposed to be here, but she couldn't make it. She's not well. And we are very, very fortunate, like every year, to have Jaya with us, who takes care of Unity Pavilion. And she's going to talk about a very favorite subject of hers, and welcome you all. Thank you again.
So I want to welcome you, very much welcome. This is the third year that we are being co-hosts here for an afternoon of the Pondicherry Poetry Festival. And it is always a pleasure to have this program. You are in the Unity Pavilion, and we also work with art and culture in different ways. And you can see we have an exhibition, which we have just put up, actually starting from today. We work with something called Art for Land. So this exhibition is kind of part of it, but we will have in February, from around 1st of February, we will have a big exhibition which is yearly, Art for Land, where artists, painters, sculptors, etc., contribute artworks. They donate the artworks, and then we donate our work and our space, and all the funds that come in from the sales of the artworks goes towards buying land, securing Auroville's land, which is always it's a big, strong heart issue for us to get that in place. We also do a few other things. People who said to me, I'm not an artist, I don't have much money, how can I help? So we created something called the Generosity Fair, where people donate things to us which are useful, fun, beautiful. And those we sell in a kind of fair where we also have a big tea party where people donate cakes and sweet things that they make. And so we have an afternoon with music and events like that. So we are kind of involving ourselves in many different ways. Some people were asking about the photo exhibition of Mother's photos. These are from Loretta's collection. They are photos taken by Tara Didi, so it is not many of them that you don't see so often. And they have been donated also towards the land. So we have those photos here. We took out the tables because we have your books today, but they are in the office. So if anybody wants to buy the photos also, that's also possible. All the money goes towards the land donations. And yeah, I'm looking forward to step out of the painting work and listen to poetry now, and to listen about poetry. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Gayatri. And we will keep this up.
Yes. Okay. Well, as you must have realized, Jaya is a special person. Jaya, I just told them you're a very special person. You know, if you talk about 100% commitment, there's something I have to learn from her. Well, there's nothing much to say. I'd like to get started. And Should we do that soon? How was your, I was wondering how you all enjoyed your trip coming here. Yeah. Adventurous. What, did you all see some tigers on the way or something? Yeah? Okay, okay. Yeah. Well, I've been in Auroville now quite a few times, and it's just beautiful to just do nothing and just receive, because very often we are always doing something. So it's an art, I think, which Auroville teaches us all the time, how to receive. Because human nature today, human beings are like tuck, 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 all of us. I don't think there are any exceptions. So I hope you will be receiving some great poetry. As yesterday, was it okay? Everybody enjoyed it? And with that, I'd, Gayatri?
So we are happy to begin our panel discussion this evening, one of our focuses of this event. And we call upon stage Srilata, who will chair this evening's panel discussion, Poets and Academics, Bridging the Gap, as you know. And we have our panelists, Ranu Unyal, Dibyajyoti Sarma, Anju Makhija, Nabanita Sengupta, and Sophia Naz. I hand over the discussion to you. So this is the main mic. Yeah. If somebody else is
So good evening, and such a pleasure to be here and to chair this session with my wonderful poet colleagues, academic colleagues, and so on. So this is a panel on poets and academics bridging the gap. It's sort of it's a topic pretty close to me, because just 2 years ago I stepped away from a full-time, very intense career in academia and said, okay, now is the time for me to sort of focus on my poetry and not try and ride more than one horse, because it was really getting difficult. And it seemed like I was just doing things in too many different directions, right? So I think this is a panel, it's an opportunity for me to also reflect on this. But before I begin, allow me to introduce our, my co-panelists. So we have Ranu Unyal, who's a professor and former head, Department of English, University of Lucknow. She's an author, editor of 10 books, widely published in some excellent journals, I see. And she also has 3 poetry collections, Across the Divide, December Poems, The Day We Went Strawberry Picking in Scarborough, which was translated into Spanish. And she's a bilingual poet, so she also has a book of Hindi poems, Saida Ke Ghar, which was published in 2021. So that's Ranu, and it's been widely translated as well. We have Dibyajyoti Sharma, who needs, I think, no introduction here, so I'm not going to introduce him. He's a hero, as it is. Okay, yeah, because it is being live. Dibyajyoti is a writer, poet, and book reviewer. He's a publisher of Red River, and they do wonderful poetry books. And well, more power to him. Anju Makhija, who is co-curator of this festival, of course. She's a Sahitya Academy winning poet, playwright, and translator. She wears multiple hats. She has 3 poetry collections, View from the Web, Pickling Season, and Poems Grow With You, co-translated. She's also co-translated Freedom and Fishers and Seeking the Beloved, which is a book I really cherish, the mystical verse of Shah Abdul Latif, and co-edited several anthologies. Her latest book is Mumbai Traps, and some of us heard her read from it yesterday. Right, so we also have, Nabanita Sengupta, who we heard, she read her poems yesterday to us. She teaches in an undergraduate college in Kolkata, and beyond her college hours, she enjoys dabbling in creative and critical pursuits. She's an academic, translator, and creative writer, as we know, and has been widely published in India. Her latest publication is a collection of poems called In Between Selves. Sophia Naz is a bilingual poet, artist, author, editor, and translator. She was nominated for the Pushcart Prize twice, and she's been featured in numerous literary journals, anthologies, including the Penguin Book of Modern Indian Poets, and so on. She's also the author of many poetry collections, including Peripheries, Pointillism, Date Palms, Open Zero, and Shahnaz, which is a biography. Her latest book, Bach Archipelago, was what she read from yesterday. That's her 5th collection of poetry. Yeah? So welcome to all of you, and once again, thank you for being part of this panel. Yeah, so without much ado, I'll perhaps, the way we thought we would do it is that I'll perhaps pose a question, and then each of the poets and scholars will sort of respond. We'll begin with Sophia and do it this way, if that's okay. Okay, we'll begin with Anju. Right, okay. All right, so this is the other mic, so I think, I can also share this mic, but I think just keep it ready, perhaps. So just as an opening question, right, it always seems to me that there are actually just, as Anju pointed out, when she first, when they began corresponding with me about this panel, there are so many poets who happen to be academics. It's not clear if they're masking as academics or they are actually academics. It's a very difficult question to answer, but that's the thing. They find their other home in academia, right? So there is that on the one hand, but and also the fact that, especially if you look at departments of literature, we draw heavily on, for our syllabi, poetry, right? We use poetry texts, we use other kinds of literary texts. So there is that. But on the other hand, there's a sort of a perceived experiential gap between people who inhabit academia and those who are, like, quote unquote pure poets, like perhaps Sophia is an example, poet and artist, right? So I just wanted to ask you all to respond to that and go in turns. Yeah.
Okay, so like Srilata said, I'm on the exact polar opposite from academia. I actually never went to college. I had to go to work to support my family right out of high school. So I am, self-taught, the University of Life. But I've actually been working through my experience as a poet. I've been working these last the last 10 years, starting in 2013, I got involved with, I stumbled upon an amazing resource. You see, the main difference is, between academics and other poets is access, For whatever reason, I didn't have access due to life circumstances, but in America, I happened to stumble upon this incredible resource called ModPo. And ModPo is it's a massive open online course. It's the most popular poetry course in the entire world. At any given time, there are almost 40,000 students enrolled. And so that, I think, from the outside in, I started slowly going in, and I started studying. It's modern and contemporary American poetry. It's definitely an eye-opener because, whatever little poetry we study is like so much, there's D.S. Eliot, and it's so heavily, British English. So, this is really quite an, I feel now I've come full circle because eventually, 2 years ago, from being an absolute outsider, my work was actually included in the syllabus that was taught in the supplemental ModPo course. So it has been an incredible experience, actually, going from the outside in. So,
thank you. Ranu, would you like to respond?
Well, for me, poetry came first. And it was much later that I chose academia as a profession. It's my living. But I feel very fortunate that I've been able to, work as a poet, write as a poet, and be a teacher, because both are very close to my heart, my writing as well as my profession. One is my passion, the other is my living. But then I think you feel extremely indebted to the Almighty when you, get to a place where you feel there are no regrets and you feel happy about it. So my cup of gratitude is full. But when you talk of the world of academia and the world of poetry, I think as a teacher, I have always encouraged my students to read as much as they can. I've asked them to read because that is one way that they get interested in poetry. And I was very fortunate in school to have some very good teachers. And then later on, when I was doing my post-graduation, I had Professor Raj Bisaria, who was a man from theater, but who was much into poetry. And the way he blended it so beautifully, I think we learn from our forefathers, we learn from our masters, and in a way, one feels very blessed when you get the right kind of a teacher. So in a similar way, I think for me also, academia is a place that, that there's no, like you see in university circles, there have been several professors. We had Nissim Ezekiel, then Eunice D'Souza in Mumbai. We had Bibu Padi and Jayant Mahapatra in Orissa. Then there were writers like Mamta Kalia, who is also a writer. I think that writing is a matter of choice. I feel that writers are blessed in a way, because you cannot choose to be a writer. It just happens. And then, of course, you have to hone your skills, and you have to keep pursuing it relentlessly. Only then is one able to establish oneself as a writer. But then, everyone wants to be a writer these days. So let me tell you one thing, especially about poetry. There are more people who are writing poetry, and there are less who are reading. So we have to somehow bridge this gap between the reader, between the audience, between people who read and the people who write. So in order to do that, we must actually have, encourage such meets, not just within a limited circle of people who just write, but I would suggest that we should have more people, more young people, listening to poetry from different walks of life. And that's where we would be able to bridge this gap between academia and poetry.
Thank you. Navneeta.
Thank you. And yes, I also agree with what Ranu says. And yes, academia, for me even, like, writing was something that I guess most of us who writing is something that we've been doing even before we've chosen a profession. So writing is there, but then I would like to add something to what she has been talking about, is when we are looking at ourselves as academics, and when we are looking at ourselves as poets or creative writers or translators, I think there is a gap between, I won't say gap, but then we are locating ourselves in two different spaces. One of the reasons may be because of the demands of the two things are very different. Academia expects a particular kind of rigor, may not be the right word, but then that's what I would rather use at this point of time. So academia expects a certain kind of rigor from you, while your writing is more at your own pace, unless and until, of course, you are writing commissioned things. But then otherwise, writing is something I would like to believe that it's more inspired, more organic. While in academic also, as academics, you have to write, but then that writing is somewhat more a studied form of writing, something that you have to do to be within the academic circle. Circle in the sense, it's demanded, it's required of you. And also, there's another part to this. One part of an academic is that of a researcher, the writing part, but then there's another part which is teaching. And that's the place where I think that the creative and the academic part of a person can come together, because that's what I try to do with my students. I try to kind of introduce them beyond course elements, books, beyond what's prescribed in their syllabus, encourage them to write as well. And this encouraging to write is something that I think comes from my own interest in writing. So,
Thank you. Divya?
I'm not an academic anymore. I was at one point, so I left it. But I must say, I grew up during the pre-internet age. So the whole ecosystem was different. So for me, I studied English. For me, studying English kind of helped find my grounding in the poetry section, because what we read, that sort of helped me to, that led through what I can look for it. It was a very good grounding. Say for example, during my MPhil course, I studied in University of Pune. Dr. R. Raj Rao curated a course on Indian poetry in English. This was a 6 months course, and that course kind of helped me to be a poet or a publisher. So whatever I am doing right now also, like, my understanding of Indian English poetry comes from that, that course. Like, it gave me grounding, gave me the base, foundation. So what I'm observing this, since I'm not an academic, I'll talk about my observation. What I'm observing is, at one point, till 80s, let's say, poetry or creative writing was the, was mostly practiced by people from the literature language departments. Most of the major poets are from English departments. But nowadays, we have poets coming from various backgrounds, and that is thanks to internet, because how internet made, as you said, internet made poetry accessible. However, what is my feeling in that is that it is making the poetry accessible. At the same time, I believe what T.S. Eliot wrote. T.S. Eliot has a fantastic essay called Tradition and Individual Talent. It is important for all of us to know our tradition. How I got here as a poet in 2023, that is because of all the poets that wrote before me. So for most of the young poets, I know one brilliant young poet. He is coming from engineering background, and he picked up by reading, whatever he finds online and on the internet. So he knows more about contemporary poetry or contemporary American poetry than Indian poetry. So now I'm sort of insisting that you start reading Indian poetry, because that is important, because you live in a small town in India. So you have to have acquire that language, how to speak our way. What Nissim did, a lot of people don't like Nissim anymore, but what Nissim did, he invented a language for us, how we can express ourselves in our English. So what I'll insist is that reading and realizing the tradition is very important, and that is why academia, to a certain extent, is important. You cannot dismiss it.
Well, I think my experience might be closer to yours. I too came from outside and was not part of the literature department, but they've already sort of made some points which I will not repeat in a different way. The point I'd like to make is, when I was in Canada, and although I was in the communications department and media studies, and when I used to go to the literature department, there was always an active conversation taking place. There was not like, oh, who's this who has come to the literature department? There was, okay, you join in whatever you knew, whatever you wanted to do, whether you wanted to listen or contribute or share, and it wasn't formal. Then when I came to India, so I had the benefit of, although I was in one department, because of my interests, I could go to the other department. So when I came back to India, and I remember going to the Bombay University, and at that point, I'd written a poem called The Farmer's Ghost. You may be familiar, some of you, which got an award. And the first question I was asked was, how come a woman is writing about farmers and men? Then I thought, oh God, what is this question? So I guess I passed some judgments, and I said, why is he saying that? That means he's very narrow-minded. So I had already formed an opinion about the academics there, that they are limited and narrow-minded. So I said, why don't you try writing a poem about women? I don't think he understood that. But the idea was to tell him, you do it now, sort of. And I think after that, he may not have invited me again. So I don't know. Anyway, and then in the coming years, I think the only way we are invited, poets, I know you're on the academia and you can help us, but we are invited to either judge competitions or to give talks on poetry in general, like sort of nothing where there is any intelligent discussion that, okay, if you're part of the canon or something, then okay, but there's not that opening. I guess this is what I want to bring, that poet. Now, when she spoke about a course in poetry, and Dibya mentions a course that he did, I don't see any courses here in India. Maybe I'm wrong, and you all can... talk about that. So I think if you're talking bridging the gap, these are 2 or 3 ideas, something concrete I'd like to suggest, that can the departments open up? Not necessarily yours, I'm not pinpointing, but how can they open up? Secondly, are the courses online, I guess, now available to everybody? So that may be one entry point or a meeting point. And it's fine to, when you have literature festivals too, hardly ever are academics invited. Never. It's not only the academics who keep you away, the poets away, it's also that the others keep the academics away. Now my question is why and what can be done about it?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, very pertinent observations from all of you. Leads me to sort of, I think, the next very big question, which we've been talking about, I think, circling around the last few sessions, which is really about gatekeeping, right? Because like it or not, it's university departments, college departments, which have the muscle and some funding, at least in India, to, in a sense, determine who gets to be read and who isn't read, who gets to be on the syllabus, who doesn't get to be on the syllabus, and things like that. I mean, there's also an entire politics of textbooks and canon making and syllabi and all of that, right? I mean, the syllabus making committees, and the fact that syllabi don't change and they sort of, the changes happen at some glacial, slow pace, right, as we know. No, so my question to all of you is, so there is that whole gatekeeping and the obvious politics and the problems and challenges with that, right? Because it is really the opposite of a democratic thing, which is what we want in poetry or in any world, actually. We want things to be democratized. We want some kind of a fairness and some kind of openness to new voices and things like that. It shouldn't be the same old set of people who are read and put on the syllabi or prescribed or whatever it is. But it happens, right? Gatekeeping happens. But the flip side of academia, which I have seen myself, because in the IIT system where I worked for over 2 decades, we did have a measure of autonomy. So we could actually also then introduce new courses. And even universities, straight-laced as they may be, in the late 90s, when I was a PhD student or a master's student myself, and in the 2000s, we have seen Dalit studies, we have seen women's writing courses, elective courses on women's writing, or maybe even elective courses on, literatures in translation, right? And I was just telling Dibya this morning that we should really use some of the books that Red River brings out as part of those syllabi, and why not? So there's that. So that's the good side. I think there's a little bit of a good thing in academia as well. That happens, and which then encourages people to take note of those literatures, which otherwise, I mean, so OUP, for instance, Mini Krishnan, I remember, began, I mean, they started with Karaka, Bama's Karaka, that got onto the syllabus, and that was a real shift. It marked a shift, I mean, dramatic shift, right? Up until then, we were all reading Chaucer, Milton, whatever, right? The romantic poets and things like that, and we were being very, very staid. It was just old white dead men that we were reading. But then we began to read Bama, we began to read maybe a Salma or a Sukirta Rani or whatever, right? So many different kinds of poets. So I just wanted all of you to sort of respond to that. The bad side of academia, I mean, I don't want to make them the villains of the piece, but the fact that there is this good side as well, and how would you respond to that?
Well, one thing I would like, the most revelation, the biggest revelation I had when encountering Morpo, by the way, you can access from anywhere in the world. It's completely free, 100%. There's no money involved, and there are actually many, many students from India as well. So the biggest revelation was the style of teaching, because all our life, in high school, the literature professor or whatever professor lectures, you listen. You are a crucible that is supposed to be filled in with the knowledge that comes from the professor, right? So the equation is completely changed, completely inverted, because Professor Al Filreis, he's the founder and it's his brainchild, Modpo, all he does, he has he will sit like this in a round table with a bunch of students, like 6 or 7, and he will take a poem and they'll read it line by line, and he will ask questions. He is not going to say a single thing. I mean, he's a genius. I mean, he will ask leading questions. intelligent questions. So the most important thing, I think, that there's no shortcut to poetry, you know. We all need to do the work, whether you are coming in academia or wherever you are. As a student of poetry, you have to do the work. The craft of poetry, there's no shortcut. But I think that the teaching leaves much to be desired. What you need to learn as a student, what we need in academia is the encouragement of critical thinking, independent critical thinking.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Sophia. In academia, one thing is very important, that you should be able to connect with your students. That's the most important thing. We have to bridge this gap which lies between the teacher and the taught. So like during pandemic, I'll share this experience with all of you, and some of you are aware of it, that during pandemic we were all enclosed and there was no moving out, no no association, physical touch. We were not having, you know, face-to-face classes. We had all gone online. So during that phase, I spoke to some of my students, and that's the time when we started with Rhetorica. So which was actually, it is actually a journal run by the students of the department. So we had different sections: poetry, fiction, non-fiction, and book reviews. So we kept that all the sections open for people from outside, and our own students could contribute. But for the book review section, I was very particular. I said to people from outside that no, it's only our students who are going to review, because that's how they learn to read and then to write. Initially, they were hesitant, but once they got into it, I think that they are all very enthusiastic, and every year we keep changing the set of editors, but they are the ones who are running it, and they're doing a great job. You know, and in the process, what has happened is that they're not just reading the canonical poets, they're also reading poets who are on the periphery. And some of them have come up with beautiful responses. Ma'am, this one's so good. He's written such a wonderful poem. You know, and I think as a teacher, as part of academia, it's very important for us, or for me, to be able to connect with them and then encourage them to write. The unfortunate thing is that everyone wants to be a writer, but then, and they are in a hurry to come out with a book. I tell them, go slow. I tell them that you read and you write and you savor every word that you write. Don't be in a hurry. Send your work to magazines, to journals to get published. You know, bringing out a book, a self-published book, is not a big deal. But then when you send your work to various journals across the country, across the globe, and then it gets accepted, it gives you a different kind of a satisfaction. And I realized this because one student of mine, Amrita Sharma, she was, she had been writing, and then her case was recommended to Kiriti Sengupta's Under 30 Poets. And that's where he selected her work, because she had, she was consistent and was working very diligently. So this gap between academia and poetry, it has to be bridged by us human beings, by us, by being able to communicate with them and encouraging them that you read good poetry, because there are bad poets across the world. And sometimes they end up reading bad poetry, but how do we decide what is good and what is not so good? So, you have to give them that power to choose. They have that discerning faculty has to be inculcated within them. And as an academic, I feel that we must try to bridge this gap between poetry, because it's not something esoteric. I'll just give you one example. A poem like Rape of the Lock, which I teach at the university. And then, it was written by Pope when he himself was 23 years of age. It was a parlor room epic. And the lines like, there were these lines like, if to her share some female errors fall, look on her face and you forget them all. So one boy stands up and he asks me, ma'am, errors are both female and male? How can they be female errors? How are they different from male errors? That kept them thinking, Then I had to tell them that, read between the lines and you enjoy. Because poetry is ultimately meant to be relished, savored. You enjoy it. So what you enjoy, you'll automatically go back to it. You'll go back to it again and again. And then it has to give you some food for thought. It has to satisfy some inner core of your heart. Good poetry does that.
So I actually teach in a college an undergraduate college, which though it says that it's in Kolkata, we get students who are primarily from the very like semi-urban background, and many of them are first generation or second generation learners and not exposed at all, in many ways not exposed to English as well. Now, I'll try to bring in a different kind of a perspective, because what happens in universities is that you comparatively, I mean, compared to us, you have a lot more freedom in terms of syllabus development, in terms of maybe funds as well. Funds, though I know is a crunch everywhere, but still, comparatively, there's this. So what I have tried to do is, I mean, now I do have quite a number of friends who are into writing, who are into translating, and who have been like in both in academics as well as creative writing. So I did try and organize a creative writing workshop in my college, inviting mostly, of course, poets, friends whom I know, because again, it's a shoestring budget that we work on, and so you can very well understand the challenges that we face. But one thing that I realized is, given an option, these students, they have tremendous urge to learn. And it was a poetry writing workshop primarily, and it was a bilingual poetry writing workshop, both Bangla and English, because most of my students, they are comfortable more with Bangla than with English. And so we did a bilingual thing. And one of the boys wrote up, I mean, a mock Pachali. I hope all of you understand. Pachali is a form of, it's a devotional narrative, generally on Lakshmi, Saraswati. So it's something that you recite on your everyday puja thing. So he wrote a mock Pachali on his own experiences and all. But what I'm trying to say is that we do try, and this is one of the ways in which I've been trying to bridge the gap, because it's not possible for us to hold very mega festivals, invite people from outside. But yes, one big blessing has been, which we realized post-COVID, of course, is the online thing. And we did have a lot of people coming in, I mean, a lot of performers speaking online. Another thing that we are trying to do in Kolkata is Intercultural Poetry and Performance Library, which is, again, a space where academics and poets are coming together. And we have these online events where we have a poet, poet meets poet, I'm forgetting the title. Indian Poetry, Past, Present, and Future. So we have this series, and where we invite someone to talk on perspective. So we did have a number of poets. We had Sachidanandan speaking. We had Nabina once. And we've been having quite a number. It's like 14, 15 episodes have happened. And there because most of us are teachers, we do share the link with our students. So, though not directly, but these are certain, I would call it bypasses that we are trying, because it gives our students a perspective. And what I realize the most as teacher is we need to initiate them, particularly for the student community that I cater to, because they are not very initiated. They need this access. And internet is one of the things that gives us an access. And I also do keep on sharing YouTube lectures and presentations. So, some of the ways in which I try and bridge the gap. So,
yeah, just quickly intervening here, but I was interested when she said, we have to sort of take these bypasses or whatever, right? And I think that's so true, because otherwise, how do you break out of thinking institutionally? You can't, because it's like it has you in that stranglehold, and you sometimes have to take these little digressions and you find your own little loopholes. In India, I think it works entirely with loopholes. But thank you for that.
I don't have direct comment on the question, but I feel that what I've been thinking about, both in the context of academics, because when you talk about reviews, reviews are part of the academics because you get API scores and everything. and also the poets. First, we don't have very many spaces for reviewing poetry. And then what is the tendency I'm observing now is that all the reviews that we publish are positive reviews, glowing reviews. So now we need to stop publishing glowing reviews. I'm waiting for a review which bashes the book. And then but not not a personal attack, but then show how it could have been better, so that the poet learns for the next step. That's how you learn. Glowing reviews will boost your ego, but it won't help you in the future. And we need negative reviews. I'm waiting for negative reviews for our books. Honestly.
Yeah, that's an entirely new point that he's brought up, and it's good you brought that up, because one thing I also realized, if you're in Europe, from what little I know, a writer or an artist or a dancer or a theatre person cannot review another dancer or theatre person or whoever. But here we find people performing two roles. Okay, you spoke of poet and academics, but we also have a role of a reviewer. And at least from my limited knowledge, that is not done in theatre or opera or anything, because obviously they might be biased. It might help the canon get more rigid. Many things are happening. Like if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And that's why I think, Dibya, that we are not getting those kind of reviews you're looking for. Because who's going to be giving them? If you're in the setup academic and you start bashing out, they'll start saying, what the hell does she think she is, And if Sophia is sitting there in USL writing a review, what? She doesn't have a degree in literature. What is this course she has done and she can judge? So then all these factors come. So what do we do to break it? So that's what you're looking for. We know the problems I think many of us have discussed here. What are some of the solutions? I think we could look in this last part.
You want to open it up to the audience now?
Yeah, I think...
I think, do we have questions from the audience, or do we do another round of questions? Yeah.
Well, again, that's what the problem with colleges is. Most colleges, library gets a very marginal budget allocation. And there too, I'll tell you the hierarchy. I mean, though it's being streamed live, but then the science subjects are prioritized. So the science subjects are prioritized because they are quote unquote costlier. The books are more expensive. So the humanities budget is further reduced. As such, the library budget is reduced, and then you have a further reduced budget for humanities, and more so for things that are not prescribed in your syllabus. What I do is I generally share poems with my students. So that's that, or maybe read out. So we had one session, we did that, again online because of, I told you, everything boils down to budget. So we did memorial session on Jayanta Mahapatra after he passed away, where poet Ashwini Kumar, he gave a talk to the students, and it was completely done by the students. They read poems of Jayanta Mahapatra, they translated the poems of him, and they also wrote poems on him. So it was something we did in collaboration with Sophia College, and we invited a large number of college students to participate. So these are the things that we try and do. Yes. Digital access is something that we try and give to this.
Are you talking of physical books that they don't buy? No, I'm not talking about buying. I'm saying, are they in the library?
Library access, digital access of books, no? So that is also a problem. There has to be a budget even for that. It's not, they don't subscribe necessarily to, that's a real problem, I think.
We are subscribing to Enlist, but then Enlist doesn't keep poetry books.
That's right, yeah.
It's like academic, hardcore academic.
So should we open this up to further audience questions? I think, so I think this is a good time. Maybe I'll just pass this mic around unless there is an audience mic. I don't know. Should I?
please ask questions. With regard to digital access, I think in India, everyone would benefit. The Rekhta has done an amazing job of digital access for Urdu, And I think, something like that, would be, if it is replicated for, English language poetry in English, from all the Indian poets, it would be amazing. Anybody?
I just want to say that Manohar Shetty's reviews, he speaks his mind. He does. Yeah.
And you know what happened. So Manohar Shetty, couple of years back, reviewed one very, very popular poet. I'm not naming names right now. And it was a negative review. So he has his opinion. He's entitled to his opinion. And he has given reason. It's not like I don't like the poem. He's given reasons why. And then the entire community ganged up on him. That how can he do that? She is my favorite poet. It's fine. It's one person's opinion. You have to respect that. And then probably it will help you understand the poems better. So we need to have a space for negative review. That's what I was trying to say.
And so you said you called the students over and discussed the reviews. So why don't we take a review which was negative and then discuss that review further, rather than the whole community boycotting him or ostracizing him, or I don't know what they did. But I read the review and I know. And let me also tell you, it was in a newspaper like Midday. Now, when you have it in Midday, the space is so limited. So then it becomes all the more important for the academic people to pick it up. Because I read the review, and obviously the people there were known and they would have supporters. But I think more importantly is that if there's no space to give a very objective judgment, sometimes we don't have to give it. And maybe the academic can enter here and pick up that review and can counter it or whatever, not necessary to counter, whatever you feel. Because then that opens a debate. And when I spoke about going to the university in Concordia, that's what they did. They take a book and said, oh, you don't feel that way. How would you feel? It's not that because he said that and that is black and white in ink or gold is written. But that's the way we are, I find. If some person who has a name writes something, we take it as if this is the, I was going to say goddamn truth. But that's how we are,
Yeah, I just wanted to respond quickly to that. Sorry, is it okay? Couple of things. One, interestingly, review, whether it's good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever, right? What publishers will tell you is that it doesn't help sell even one book. Okay, so that is one side of the story, which came as news to me. Okay, so that's one. But then, of course, we all hope that we'll get good reviews. That's another story. But even I have had this experience of actually having written once a fairly negative review of this poet who was translated from the Hindi. I won't name names. And believe it or not, I've had people, actually the poet's son, calling me up, getting my number from somewhere and saying, this is not done, that my father's so old and we shouldn't have done it. And it is really difficult. And the third point I want to make is that, there are very few reviewers for poetry books, right? And for instance, now I've come to this point of complete burnout because I've just reviewed so many poetry books. I'm like, I don't want to review it anymore. And if I say that, then there are people who say, who else? I mean, I'm not boasting or anything, but I'm just saying that there are very few who are even willing to offer that service because it takes about at least 4 working days minimum, if not more, to read the book, to understand it, to say something cogent, and as she says, within that, like whatever, 700, 500 word. I mean, poetry books get even shorter word count, and the pay, I mean, it's not like you're getting a big, it's not about the money anyway, but that doesn't even come into the picture. So it's not enough for your labor, right? So there are all of these challenges, and I think I agree with Anju that ideally we should have non-poets reviewing poetry books. But I don't know why the hell that doesn't happen. And in fact, even fiction writers or fiction reviewers will not review poetry books. So that's why it comes back to us poets. I don't understand the logic of this.
No, also, I think there is one of the reasons for, I'm just chipping in, so one of the reasons for very less poetry reviews is I think there's a general dearth of poetry readers. I mean, whether you're a poet or a non-poet, the problem is a dearth of poetry readers. And because we are discussing academia as well, so poetry teaching also, that's why kind of takes a different kind of seat and perspective within the classroom, you know. So,
we have to look at questions. We seem to have answers to many things which don't happen. But questions are there. Is it because you all are so isolated from what is happening in the real world, in the internet, what the youngsters are into, that you all are sitting and saying, this is how it should be done, that we should have a journal, we should review it. Are these outdated modes? Is there another way in the modern world we live in that you all can do what you all are doing in an old way?
I think these are the best times for poetry. I tend to disagree because I feel that these are the best times for poetry. And there are so many avenues, online journals, people do read and they contribute to those journals, and books are being reviewed here, there, and everywhere. It's just that, you know, one has to tap the right place and the right kind of people. And it's true that poets are reviewing poets, and when you give books to students, they would also prefer non-fiction. They are more interested in reviewing a travel book rather than a book of poems. But then, you know, we have to keep insisting that, no, read this book, and then they get back to you and they say, yes, it's worth it. But there is enough, I think, space for each one of us, and there's enough, and there's a lot of good work that is happening.
I think we should wind up now. We're running, so we can probably carry this discussion over outside of this. Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you as well.